Hello, everyone. This is episode 2, and I'm here with the 2 most special women in my life, my wife, Kayla, to my left, and my mom, Michelle, but obviously I call you Mom. Do you call her Mom or Michelle?
That's a good question. We should figure that out. I've been calling you Michelle.
Yeah, absolutely, Michelle. I thought
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're in Southern California. You're here for a couple of days with Dad.
Right.
And you're checking out our home here. For those people that don't know, on Instagram, you are Hey Beginner Wife, and you started posting how long ago?
I started posting March of 2020.
Wow. So we're about 4 years in.
Yep.
And you're about to hit 100,000 followers, which is exciting.
Yes.
Now, how long did it take you to get 1,000 followers? Like starting from zero, because this is different from personal.
Right. Over a year, for sure. Maybe even 18 months. It was really exciting when I hit 1,000.
Yeah. And you hit 1,000, and then you hit 10,000 the next year, and now you're almost at 100. So how would you describe your page right now? Like, what is it?
So it's advice for young women who want to thrive in their marriage, who want information on being married that I would consider the basics of marriage that they've never heard, that they haven't been taught what to do. But it's not just for young wives. It's also for single women who want to be married, who just want to begin reframing what that means. And so what I present, I think, is practical enough and that they'll remember it. And it also helps in relationships that they have now. It's not all just for dating. I mean, the way we interact with our husbands is also the way we're going to act with coworkers and the basics of those things.
So what percent of it is female? What percent of your followers are female and men?
It's a great question. I haven't looked at my analytics.
Oh my gosh,
lately.
I didn't even know this yet. Mom.
No, the last time I looked, I probably had 80% women and 20% men. It might have been a little less, might be
Got it.
15 to 20.
And in terms of your credentials, you're my mom. You raised all 6 of us kids. I'm the oldest. We have 3 boys, 3 girls. You've been married to Dad for about 38 years.
Yes.
Right? And you started this account, Hey Beginner Wife, a few years ago. So I want to talk to you today about like love, advice for, a lot of people listening might be dating, they might not be married. Is your page more so for people that are married or people that are in the dating process?
Probably more so if you're married.
Got it.
But I do also present content for people who are single about what to look for in marriage or what to consider helpful. And I throw in there things for parents as well, because that affects your marriage. But I am mindful that what I post, I hope it's going to be helpful on a broad basis for most people, because if I'm posting something about being single, you might know someone that can benefit, or if you're talking to your younger sister or your older brother, you can share that information with them. So even though one day you might be a young wife following for advice for being a young wife, and I throw something out there for dating, we all know people in our life we can share that with. So I'm hoping that most people that enjoy the topic of marriage in general would find that interesting, even though that particular day might be a post that really addresses the singles.
Well, I'm just so excited because us kids have been asking you to make this Instagram advice page for many, many years. So we're all from Illinois. We were homeschooled by you and Dad. And you obviously put in a ton of work being a mom, being a stay-at-home wife who raised all of us kids, taught us, with homeschooling, helped us get to all of our Little League games and football practices and everything. And in the midst of that, growing up, obviously it wasn't always super glamorous, but now you and Dad are empty nesters, and all of us kids are kind of off doing our own thing. And not only do you have 6 kids now in the world doing their own thing, but you and Dad now are able to kind of go on to this phase 2 of your life now, right? I think a lot of us kids were excited for you to do this because so many people in the world now want what you have in your life. They want the fruit of that. They want a good marriage, and they want, great kids that don't turn out to be spoiled brats, right? So when you were posting early on and you started to have a few posts that really resonated with people and kind of picked up, do you remember like what the first, one or two posts were that caught people's attention and what they talked about, or not really?
I know when I talked about what it means to respect your husband, I got some people with deeper questions, which didn't surprise me because when I first heard that teaching, I had questions too. So it's one of my favorite topics because I think it's one of the most helpful topics and yet one of the most misunderstood. So that one, I definitely did notice that as well. But I think also just sharing stories, I got a lot of engagement with because people don't get to see behind the scenes in a marriage. They see who you are on the street and who you are at work, who you are at church. But to actually say, and I really try to share my thoughts and my stories and my mistakes, and I've had people push back on that and say, well, why are you glamorizing the fact that you had that terrible attitude? And I think I want you to know that that's real. That's what's going on. For someone that has a happy marriage, I've been where you've been. I still deal with thoughts in my mind of being frustrated or accusations and stuff. So I think every time I can post a story of how I got from point A to point B, that's very well received because people aren't talking about what goes on behind closed doors.
It's so crazy to me and my brothers and sisters how you have all these stories that you remember from the past 38 years. Did you journal when you were raising all of his kids, or how do you remember all these like specific stories that happened with Dad?
Right. And I don't have a great memory for this. So when I started, I thought, oh my gosh, people love stories. I need stories. I really tried to remember, or when I'm with other like newlyweds or young parents, it'll bring back a memory like, oh my gosh, that's right. So because it's been a slow process, I mean, I think it's been very slow growth in my Instagram. It's given me time to remember things. I have gone back and looked at pictures to try to remember different stories, or if I'm doing a certain topic, then I'll stop and think, okay, now what was that? Or I'll ask your dad, like, remind me, what was this like? Or can you think of any example of when this happened to us? And but I also, the simple stories work too. I mean, I wrote about how frustrated I was when he would leave his apple cores in the car. That sounds like nothing, but it was a really big deal. And I think that's applicable to say, oh gosh, someone's talking about the fact that her husband left trash in the car. Yeah, because they do. But could it be me? It could be flipped. It could be the wife that's leaving trash. And then that brings a whole conversation of an example. Yeah, well, why is that a big deal? Or why are you reacting like that? And which is the limit of Instagram, is you don't have the back and forthing of conversations. So my number one love is sitting down with a wife or a couple or people and
like us
conversing. Yeah, because then you really get to go deeper, and Instagram has that challenge of how can you give a little snippet of information, but then the whole context. And so coming up with the context, and maybe we'll talk about that later, but that's why I wrote a book that I just wrote, is to provide a lot more context and allow me more time to present a concept and then make it accessible to people that want to know more.
Yeah, so you have a book coming out soon. It's called Hey Beginner Wife, same as your handle.
Yeah.
What is the book about and who is it for?
So the subtitle is Practical Tips and Heartfelt Advice to Help You Thrive in Your Marriage. So that's what it's about. My target audience is beginner wives. And by beginner wives, I love that term because to me it means don't be too hard on yourself. You're just a beginner. And we're all so generous with beginners. If you're learning to ride a bike, it's like, I'm a beginner. I'm going to get this. And to think like I'm a beginner wife takes a lot of that pressure off. We all want to do it perfectly from the beginning. So that's who it's for, is the women that are out there. But people who read it will see the principles in each chapter are timeless. And so you can be married 25 years and still get value in it. In fact, I have people that reach out to me and say, I've been married 30 years and you're teaching me things I've never heard before, which I love. I wish they had that, 5 years, however long ago. But I do think along those lines of what do I wish I would have known? Or I'll look at a couple and I think, oh gosh, I wish they knew this. So that's really where I'm coming from, is what is really valuable to you today to help you thrive. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I'm just so excited because 10 years ago, I moved to LA, started working in the entertainment industry, and I started doing a lot of things with YouTubers and Instagram people, and that was kind of my job. But now, today, many years later, you now have a nice following, offering, your advice for young couples and, beginner wives. My wife is a longevity expert, so you have a great podcast and platform for true longevity health, optimization practices. Amy, my younger sister, your second of six, she is at Hack Your HR. She's the chief people officer at Tom's, the shoe company, and she got a platform through, offering people HR advice. And it's so fun and random that a lot of us each have our own little niche. And it's just so cool to see each person kind of leaning into that, because it's weird to put yourself on camera when you're not used to it, because all of us have other jobs that we do. Now, you and Dad were different. So you were the prom queen in high school, popular, all that stuff, according to your brothers. And Dad was in band. He was more, sounds like more of the nerdy side. So what was that like when you guys got married and came together and then decided to, really have a big family? You and Dad both had different backgrounds, and now you kind of were united. What was that like? Was it fun? Was it different? Because you and Dad are very different. Obviously, couples have similarities, but they also have a lot of differences. Do you feel like you and Dad have personality differences, or do you feel like you're more similar than you are different?
I think we're more similar on the basics that really matter, that structurally give a marriage strength. And I don't feel that we're that different. We're different in fun ways that we tease each other about, but not vastly different where I feel like, oh my gosh, I have to deal with this huge opposite personality. But in terms of being purposeful and intentional people, we're both mindful of that. We both want to make a difference in the world and always have, and we're both very focused on helping other people. So those are basics that make us very similar. We were, if you look back at high school and who we hung around with, yes, we were in different groups, for sure. But we probably would have been in the same classes.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. So you're not a licensed marriage therapist or anything like that. You're just kind of sharing with folks online what your life has been, what worked for you, what didn't work for you. You have something a lot of people would be excited to have: 4 decades of an amazing marriage, 6 kids, of which I'm the oldest. You said the first post that really started to help you kind of, take off online was about the concept or idea of respect and love. Can you kind of share what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I'll just say this. I thought that because I had desired marriage for so long and thought about it for so long and even listened to interviews about it and read some books even before I got married, I really felt that I knew what I was doing. And I think in general, women feel that they have a grasp of healthy marriage, healthy parenting more than their husbands do, because we know that we're good communicators. That's our heartbeat for many of us. We enjoy talking a lot, communicating a lot. And so I went in thinking that I had a handle on what it meant to be married, and I needed to teach Steve how to be married, kind of thing. And so if we had a disagreement, I would be the one to kind of press for resolving that my way, because I felt like I kind of knew what to do. And we just we operated in that, and it worked really, really well. And when you, Warren, were probably about, I think 14, I'm going to say. So then John would have been
6.
6. Thank you. So still everyone was at home. And I heard what I'll call a podcast because I actually heard it on the radio.
Dr. Laura?
No, this was focused on the family.
Oh.
So they had programs that came on at the same time every day. This is before the internet. And I knew what time it came on, and every day was a different conversation about family. So I always tried to hear this. I loved it. And this particular time I was driving in the car, and I turned it on, and the topic was respect and how men are hardwired by God is how they presented it, to really value respect, to operate in a world where they just automatically give respect, that women tend to operate more in the love realm of making sure you're cared for and comforted and encouraged and inspired. Okay, fine. I mean, I hadn't really thought of it that way. That worked for me. But then they talked about indicators that your husband wasn't feeling respected. And the indicator he gave was that when you're in conflict, if your husband just says, we're done here, we're not talking about this anymore, and leaves the room, that's an indication that he feels disrespected. And I was stunned because Steve would do the exact same thing. He would say,
Dad would do that?
Yeah, he would say, you know what, this is where I'm not talking about this anymore. We can talk about it some more tomorrow, but I'm done for now. And he would leave. And I thought, that just means he doesn't know how to communicate. I need to help him learn how to do this. So I would press in and say, no, I don't want to wait until tomorrow. We are this close to figuring it out. You know, let's talk about this. And he goes, no, we're done. And so I took that to be a sign of weakness, that I had the upper hand in communication. And what the teacher said on the radio was, what's going on is when a man feels disrespected, he doesn't want to respond by disrespecting you, because his value of respect is so high that he, especially for his wife, he knows if he's going to continue talking, he's going to say something disrespectful, and that goes against everything within him. So because he was showing me honor, he would table it until his emotions were calmed down and he could say something without hurting me. This is a totally new concept, but something about it rang true. I thought, I think he's right, but oh my gosh, I just really needed to sit with it. And so I did. I mean, I pondered and pondered, and he had written a book, and I thought, I've got to get my hands on this book. And another thing that I learned in the process of studying respect was that men feel disrespected when you correct them. And I think part of it is the way that you correct them. I mean, obviously, it's not a matter of pride, like I do everything right, you can't correct me. It's more when a woman corrects her husband, oftentimes she's just defaulting to a mother mode. And so her corrections and her criticisms and her nagging sound like she's being a mom. And I heard that, and then I began observing and listening to myself, and I thought, that is 100% right. I am talking to my husband the same way I'm talking to my kids.
Wow.
And that stunned me. And then I talked to Steve a little bit about it and kind of said, do you feel this way when I say that? And he'd be like, yes.
Or you asked Dad how he felt?
I did. After reading some of the book and listening and pondering, I ordered a copy of it because you could do that at the time.
What was it called? Love and Respect?
No, the book was Love and Respect. But I ordered a CD copy of the interview on the radio because I wanted to listen to it over and over again. I probably listened to it 6 times before I began to get a grasp on what they were saying, which to me is super humbling because I felt like I was so intensely invested in understanding marriage. But then when I began to hear more of it, then I did ask your dad and say, okay, so when you just kind of shut down right there, were you feeling like I was attacking you, or were you feeling disrespected? everything I asked him, he said yes. That the teacher, actually it was the author of the book, had instructed. And he finally said, "Is this a surprise to you, Michelle?" And I was like, yes, I didn't want to admit it. But that also really hit me hard, was the idea that men don't know how women have, what our default is.
Yeah, I don't.
We aren't raised to respect our brothers. We aren't raised to respect our dad. And so then we're not raised to respect our husbands. Now, maybe our mother modeled respecting our dad, and that would go 1,000% toward helping us to do that. But what I see a lot of and hear a lot of is women talking to their children about their father as if he's incompetent, incapable, stupid. I mean, we see that in movies.
Yeah, culture.
A lot. But now that I'm sensitive to it, I actually hear it a lot too. It's kind of like they're bringing their children along under their arm as their friends. Like, well, if your dad wasn't home late every night, we might have eaten earlier tonight. And that's really disrespectful to talk to your children that way. It undermines his authority. It gives them permission to accuse their dad of coming home late. It's layers upon layers of an idea that I think is super helpful in foundational marriage advice, the whole respect. And yes, I do want to say, we as women want to be respected too. It's not at all a dichotomy.
It's not a gray fallacy.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
so
that's what we call it. So Kayla tends to see the world in black and white, like yes and no, and I'm always like in the middle, like everything is a gray. There's always a gradient. So yeah, just because you're saying men need respect and women need love, that's not saying the men don't want love and the women don't want
correct.
respect.
Absolutely.
Obviously.
Yeah. And if I'm disrespected, I react for sure. I take for granted the respect because he gives that to me so freely that I always feel respected by him. And I think also because of that, men are shocked when their women are disrespecting them because they
would never do that to another guy.
No, never. Yeah. And they don't feel that way at work.
Yeah. They feel the opposite at work. They feel so respected at work, and they come home, and if their wife or girlfriend or whatever doesn't show them respect like they receive at work or outside of the house, that's going to be a world of hurt for the relationship.
Yes. And they don't understand it. They think that their wife is doing it on purpose. And I think my heart is tender toward young women because I think most of them aren't doing it on purpose. They just don't know.
Yeah. So you didn't know this whole concept of love and respect until I was 14. So 15 years into the marriage, you started to dive into this topic, which is what helped you, grow your audience online, this idea of love and respect. Did that mean the first 15 years of marriage with Dad, there was a lot of hiccups where he felt disrespected and you would have to come to him and ask him what was wrong? And was he good at communicating to you what happened, or did he assume that you meant to disrespect him sometimes?
We didn't go back and talk about that.
You were too busy with the kids?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I what I remember, I internalized a lot of stuff. I couldn't figure it out. When if he would, not that we were arguing all the time, but if he did say, Michelle, we need to talk about this later, then I was doing a lot of internal thought of, well, what's wrong and why is it later? And I couldn't just relax. If we didn't have, that was part of the problem, is if we had an argument going on, I couldn't put it on the back burner and relax. So I wanted to get it solved so I could have peace in my life and deal with the little children running around. He couldn't resolve it because he had other things going on, and I think he was trying to process my emotions. So we got through it, but I do think that there was a lot of stuff that I had to then talk through later with him, just as I realized what it was, just that I had internalized that made me feel I don't even know how I would put it. Just heavy a little bit until we worked it out. Communication stuff.
If you could send a message to yourself as a newlywed, what would that be?
Don't try to micromanage your marriage or your husband.
Whoa. Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, I because I said how much I felt like I understood controlling ideas of marriage, and I felt like I had the upper hand, I gave myself permission to take the lead in how we communicated, when we communicated, what did we talk about. It was harder for me to relax and just enjoy being married because I was trying to manage so many things. And I was stressed about the idea that, okay, we're a young couple. We need to establish traditions. This is our first Christmas.
Because you were young. You got married 24?
24.
Wow.
Yeah, so our first Christmas, it was like, okay, well, if we don't get a Christmas tree now, what's going to happen next year? Like, we have to have a tradition of we can't mess this up.
Yeah.
And what can we have for our first? Well, we didn't have Christmas dinner, but we need a traditional Thanksgiving meal, Thanksgiving dish. What can it be? I felt like if we didn't get those little tiny things right the first year or two, that it was all lost. I don't.
And is that your personality type of being the oldest and being type A?
Probably, yes.
Because Dad's the oldest also, so you both were oldest siblings coming into marriage.
Yes, but he doesn't have that. He is much more relaxed.
He's more melancholy than you.
Thank God.
Yeah. Okay. What's one piece of advice that would cause your followers to unfollow you about marriage or love or anything?
So we're trying to lose my followers right
Yes,
now,
exactly. Yeah. Or, I mean, ironically, that will attract more followers because the internet, the crazier thing you say, the more people start to take notice. So I just think it's like good marriages don't make for good TV shows. Right?
I know.
So,
it's true.
And you really share the details of the last 40 years with the ups and downs. And that's how people got excited about what you're sharing. So is there any nugget that's kind of controversial, that you posted about in the past maybe that surprised you?
Yeah. So
because you posted about sex sometimes.
Well, that's what I was going to say is whenever I post something about sex, I feel like I just am stirring up a hornet's nest. And yet I really want to be authentic and helpful. And I feel like if you don't share something like that, then there's a whole piece of your marriage that's missing. But because of all the pain and misunderstanding that is out there, it's a very difficult subject to handle with the care that it needs on Instagram, for Pete's sake. I mean, you could do it here in a room setting or with an older woman who's a mentor. But so I don't want to leave that piece out, but I'm also very sensitive that I can't give it the context that it needs. So I will tell you a piece of advice that I gave that people went crazy about. And the idea that for men, sex is more than just a physical act, that it's emotional for them as well. And that men need, or when they have sex with their wife, they feel loved and connected and cared for and valued. And that's a need that they have emotionally. So it's not just that they're asking us for something physical. They're asking to be connected to us. And when we reject them, there's a part of them personally that feels rejected. Just like I might feel rejected if I really need to have a conversation with Steve and work things out, and I just need to talk it through. And he says, I'm all out of words today. I'm sorry. You're just going to have to figure this out yourself. And maybe, not tomorrow, but the next day we can sit down. I need to do this now.
Yeah.
And so I like to think of it in that way, and I don't think that men express that part of their sexuality to women. It's very vulnerable to say, I feel rejected by you, and because it's happened several times in the last week, I'm kind of hurting. So, and that I came by reading some books and learning that it's not even like Steve said to me, this is how I feel when that happens, which makes it even trickier because I don't think the men maybe have even figured that out about themselves. So, but it rings true to me. And when I've talked about it, when I've asked your dad, he goes, yeah, that is kind of what it's like. So I posted and said, what if sex was more than a physical need for your husband and actually an emotional need? And And I got a lot of male followers. When
Really?
I posted that. I was like, wait. I'm not writing this for you. I'm trying to help your wives understand.
And all the guys start following you when you start talking about
these
sex.
Men following me, and I was like, this is really interesting. But I really think that's so valuable, and it should give women compassion toward their husband of, honey, I want my husband to know I value him and I desire him. And I think the way it helps me to understand this is, I think this is very simple, but I think men need sex first before they feel deeply connected to their wives. And most women need that conversation and quality time together before they feel connected. And then they want the sex to kind of seal the deal. So kind of the whole idea that some people have talked about of how women are slow cookers and men are microwaves, that's kind of their idea. We're coming from two different places. But again, even the idea that men and women are different is almost a taboo subject to say. And so I want to talk about that on my Instagram account because I think people who are married would agree that they're different, most of them. So anyway, that topic got a lot of backfire, and really anytime I try to touch the topic of sex, I lose people, which is kind of sad because I want to encourage them and help them. But I do think that that's not necessarily an Instagram topic. You need more context to really understand and go deeper.
One of the things that was in your bio, I don't know if it's still there, but it's, helping people avoid divorce. Divorce rates are so high right now. It's very sad. If you had to narrow it down to one reason or a couple reasons, why would you say so many people are getting divorced?
You know what? They have to enter the marriage with the understanding that it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's not the first lap. It's not a 5K.
Yeah.
It is a marathon, and you need to go at it from that mindset. What I think is going on is people see marriage as something that is of value to themselves. It makes them feel good. That person they value.
Like, what's in this for me?
Yes.
You
make me feel good, and I want more of that. Not, I want to invest in you. And that's part of it. I'm sure that's part of it is because you make me feel so good, I want to make you feel good. But when you take that away, your feelings, the feelings of love, then what do? Then you think, oh, something must be wrong. I must have married the wrong person. I need to start over, rather than dive into the fact that love is a verb. And so all the verbs of love is action. Love believes the best about someone. Well, what does that look like? When do you have to believe the best about your husband? When all the evidence looks like he did it on purpose, then you believe the best that no, he actually didn't. He's home late because of traffic, or he didn't mean to say it in that context, or maybe he actually has an ear infection and his ear is bothering him and it came out really short and snappy, and he's, you misread the situation kind of thing. I think believing the best, or love is patient. Love is generous, giving away from yourself. It's not self-seeking. All those action verbs of what love looks like, I think if you understand that going into marriage, you can do it for the long haul. But if you go in thinking love is a feeling can fade and a feeling can fail you, and then you're going to think divorce is an option.
Yeah.
And no one talks about the tough times in a marriage where you're not feeling it, where you're getting up and doing the right thing, or responding in caring for someone because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think one of the main reasons people get divorced today is because they definitely look at love as a feeling and not a decision or a choice, right? Like when a woman has a baby, or when a couple has a baby, you're forced to give of yourself all this time and energy into the baby, and through that act of sacrifice, you then begets love. And yes, you'll love the baby no matter what, but because you have to dedicate so much time at the beginning to this young infant, that actually amplifies the love you have because it's an action. It's not just a feeling.
Yeah.
So I feel like so many people enter a marriage thinking, okay, what can this person do for me? Is this my soulmate? Do they complete me? How do they make me feel?
Yeah.
And then a few years in or a few decades in, they wake up and decide, oh, I married the wrong person. I'm not in love anymore. When it's like, no, love isn't just a feeling. It's a decision and a choice that you have to work on all the time, which is why we try to prioritize, date nights, obviously, and, work at all that stuff. But I think that's part of the reason people get divorced so often, among a ton of other reasons.
Well, and they're not encouraged to stay in it either. It depends on if you surround yourself with like-minded friends, which is also very challenging to find people who have actually made a covenant of marriage. I mean, in my book, I talk about the fact that there's a difference between covenanting together, which is kind of a till death do us part. We're in this together. We're going to do what it takes to get to the finish line, as opposed to just a commitment that is breakable. If you can find a way, a contract, not a commitment, like a marriage contract. This is what it's going to look like. And if we want out, there's a way out. So, and obviously, I'm not promoting domestic abuse at all.
Yeah.
But if we move that aside and talk about just the daily difficulty of learning to love someone who's not yourself, and selfishness, which comes up, that's what we need. We need marriage to keep us committed to the process, and then we get to the really good places. I give an analogy in the book, and I really, really like this one. It's about Steve's experience of being in a drum corps. So he was in marching band. A drum corps is what you do over the summer. And this is a group of college-age kids who try out to be part of this corps. And it's like a marching band, and they put together a show that's like something you would see at a halftime. But they do the exact same show the entire summer.
Jeez.
So they're putting on a production, and it is a full-time job. So they show up, they do practice every day, they're on the road, so they're not at home. Gosh. They might be living with families, or they might be sleeping on the floor of a high school gym in their sleeping bags after they perform at night. So then there's competitions like maybe every 2 weeks. And they see the same other corps at the competition, and it comes down to a minutia of final scores. So you might have a 91.3, and the other corps might have a 91.7. So they beat you by 0.4 of a percentage.
Ooh.
So they are fully invested in doing something that is ridiculously hard. I mean, he played a reed instrument, and he would tell me that his lips were bleeding, and they were in the sun, and so they were sunburnt, they were parched. They were told what to do every day. It wasn't like, I don't feel like practicing today, and I saw that there's this water park, and it's, we're in 95-degree heat. Forget it. I'm going to go do this. No, everyone showed up every single day, did the exact same thing, which gets old and difficult. But at the end of the summer was the national competition. And if you won, can you imagine the thrill of winning? Especially when you're in the top and it's tenths of a percentage of who won that you worked hard for. And everyone is working hard. There's probably like 10 judges on the field taking notes, looking at everything, your feet, your shoulders, your presentation, the sound, the flair. But when you won, you've achieved something so incredible that you gave it your all, that there's nothing like it.
Is this an analogy for marriage?
Yes,
okay.
Because...
I was wondering where you were going with that.
Because you get to the end, and as a group of people, you are now bonded in a way you've never been bonded with before. It's like going to war together. Yeah. These are your comrades for life because you sacrificed together to reach the one goal. And in marriage, the two of you have sacrificed together. You've done things day in and day out that are exhausting, that are tiring, that were difficult. You might have wanted a way out, but you stuck it through. You did the same conversation again. You say, I'm sorry for the 10th time for the same thing. And yet at the end,
and forgive for the same thing. Yeah.
Yes, and forgive. And at the end, you have this marriage that is just solid, that everybody wants. Somebody could look at me, and I think it would be fair to look at me and go, oh, I want your marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you what I needed to do to get there. No one talks about the get there part or what it was like for Steve on a 95-degree day with bleeding lips and sunburned shoulders to keep going. But he still, 40 years later, fondly looks back on those people, those friendships, and the experience. He goes, I would do it all over again. There's nothing else in my life that can match that experience. And it was a highlight. So I think that's true of marriage, and no one has the ability to look forward 20 years to what it's going to be like in 20 years.
Yeah.
They want to give up earlier because they don't understand that a lot of the reward comes later.
Yeah, I think married couples need other married couples as a support system to, really help each other and kind of work through things when things get hard. A big mistake that some people make that I've seen is the moms or the dads, if they don't have a good support system, they'll sometimes talk to their teenage or young kids about the marriage or about their spouse in a way that's completely inappropriate. Like a 10-year-old, kid should not be hearing from the mother or father about what's going on with their relationship.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, 1,000%.
I mean, that just really confused me because, a few of our friends growing up, I would see that and I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, they might be trying to draw that child on their team, their side, a friendship, because some parents seek friendship with their children way too early. So there could be that too.
Yeah, so that's a good topic. Should parents want to be friends with their kids? Can they do that, or what's your thoughts?
That's 100% your goal, is to be friends. But friendship comes in the adult years. I mean, you are responsible for that child's safety, for their instruction, for the shaping of their conscience, for saying and you are an authority in that child's life for that reason, because you are the one taking on that responsibility. And so you start by that's your first phase, is that you are a disciplinarian in authority, and you're establishing that. Like, no, I am the parent. I'm making the decisions to keep you safe. That's my job. And so you set up that structure for them, and then you teach them that there's consequences in life. If you do something wrong, then there's a consequence. We all need to learn that. And then you teach them the moral reason why. It's not just the black and white. It's like, well, let me tell you why we think of other people first. We place value on other people. It's not just all about us. And we teach them how to live in the world, but by giving them moral reasons. And then you come alongside of them as a coach and say, okay, I've taught you all this. And let's say they're probably like 13 years old. So now it's on you. If they say, Mom, can I go to this barbecue on Saturday? It's like, well, I don't know, Warren, can you? And then what does that mean to Warren? He goes, well, you think it through. What are your responsibilities this week? Are you caught up? Tell me about your classes. What's your homework like? Do you have any needs? Have you committed to something at home? Maybe you had chores or something. Then you would say, okay, well, my homework's done. My chores are done. I'm going to be back home by whatever time. Yes, I can go. Like, you coach them through the responsible decision making.
You're going to be great at that.
And then, I bet. But then they learn that and say, Mom, I'd like to go to a barbecue on Saturday, and I'm good because I've done all these things. Perfect. Great idea. And then maybe they go and they come back, and they come back late, and then the next day they wake up late and they were supposed to be at work. And then you coach them through that, and they're like, well, Mom, why didn't you wake me up? Well, honey, that was on you, and the consequences, you were late to work. So then you deal with that with your boss.
Yeah.
And then as an adult, you become their friend.
A lot of the advice you give is about relationships and marriage, but I'm curious, like, there were 6 of us kids growing up. How did you as parents figure out how each of us needed to be disciplined? Because each kid is so different and responds to criticism or discipline very uniquely. So was that easy to figure out which of us kids were more sensitive or which of us kids needed harsher punishments? Like, how did you and Dad approach that?
Some children were easier to figure out than others, but...
Who was easy?
You were easy because you wore your emotions on your sleeves. I mean, when you didn't want to do something, you just didn't do it. And that's a lot
of spankings.
That was a lot easier to parent than someone who says, yes, I'll do it, and then runs off and doesn't do it. Much more passive. You've got to figure out, because you don't necessarily find out they didn't do it. until later, and then it's a lot easier to deal with something in the moment. I think the important thing there is to be aware that every child is different and approach it from that way. We were very intentional about how we parented and intentional about the fact that we had different personalities in children. And I didn't want to take the little spirit of a child and break it, because, some of you kids were more strong-willed than others, and that's how you were wired. And I thought that was for a reason.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to break a strong will. So we had to really talk about that. How do we respond in this without, and yet still encourage this child to stay fierce? Because they're going to need that as an adult for something. I don't want to take that away.
Yeah.
But you also have to rein it in. So.
Yeah, you and Dad were very intentional with how you raised all of us kids, and I think you ended up teaching a class about how to parent or how to raise kids. What were some of the principles from that class that you spoke about that really kind of surprised people?
The most surprising is that your marriage is the center of your family, and if the marriage isn't healthy, parenting of the children won't be healthy. And we were surprised when we took the class of the emphasis, because first we took the class and then we started teaching it because it was so helpful. But to say that the marriage is at the center, what is the alternative to that? The children are at the center.
Yeah.
And the default for most people is to put the children at the center because they're so needy and demanding.
They think that's the loving thing to do as parents.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that is shocking, and I have included that on my Instagram, and people push back like, no. And I think, okay, another example of needing context. It sounds counterintuitive, and it sounds like you're going to
push them away,
not even take care of their needs.
But it's the most loving thing to do.
Yes, because it gives them that security that mom and dad are okay. And we had that great example of when Mary was little. So Steve was working crazy hours because he's self-employed, and the economy had tanked, and so he needed to work a lot. So he left for work early in the morning before you kids woke up. He came home to prioritize our evening meal so he could be at the table with everybody, kiss everybody, but he left before bedtime. But we had like an hour and a half where he was in the home with all you kids, and we got to eat and play with you, roughhouse, whatever. And then he went back to work, and he came home maybe at 9:30 or 10. So then we might have half an hour then before going to bed, or we might have talked on the phone during the day. But you kids didn't see that part.
Yeah.
You didn't see that we ever connected. So one season, Mary, who was 3 years old, I don't even think she was 3 because she wasn't talking really clearly. She started coming in and sleeping on the floor next to our bed. And I woke up, and here she is. She had been tucked into her bed, and I wake up in the morning, she's on the floor with her blanket. And that happened 3 days in a row. And finally, I just said to her, Mary, why are you sleeping on the floor, honey? And she, without even thinking, she said, I like it when ooh with ooh husband. And it was ooh. It wasn't even you. It was ooh husband. And I thought, oh my gosh. First of all, what 3-year-old says husband?
Yeah.
It's not even like, I like it when you're with daddy. That's what really caught my attention was, what? And then I told your dad, I said, this is what she said. And we thought about it, and we thought, she doesn't see us together. Because when dad comes home, he's over there with you kids. I'm over here with you kids. I'm sitting at the head of the table. The focus is on making sure the kids have a connection with dad, that they saw him, that they felt loved. But what we were missing was they weren't seeing our marriage relationship. So one of the things that was presented in this marriage class was sometime during the day, after dinner is a great time, mom and dad sit down on the couch, just spend 5-10 minutes talking to each other so the kids see that you're a united couple. And we heard that in the class and thought, why? We didn't do it. So we did that after this whole thing with Mary. We said, well, let's try that. We did that maybe 3 days in a row, and Mary stopped coming into our bedroom forever. She never came back in our bedroom again. But we kept doing that as a habit. And what we did was say, this is our quiet couch time. you kids can play here, but you can't interrupt us. This is just us talking. And we wanted, really, it was just kind of to model for you kids. It wasn't, 5 or 10 minutes is not very much for a married couple, but to model to the kids that mommy and daddy are a team. They love each other. They saw us kiss each other. And that was a great object lesson for what was surprising in the marriage curriculum the parenting curriculum that we taught was to prioritize your marriage.
But we were talking about the topic of children. So Warren asked me super quick. It was like the first text, I think. Like, do you want kids? How many?
Yeah.
Are you a Christian? Got like big questions out of the way. But in general, what advice would you give? How is it? Is there a too early, a too late? When do you think newly married couples should start talking about children?
Or dating. What about dating?
Or dating, yeah.
Dating. I think fairly soon, if that's a priority to you. It probably depends on how old you are. You all were older and very intentionally looking for a spouse.
Yeah.
So if you've identified that as a priority to you, then absolutely ask that from the beginning.
But what if it scares off the guy? Would your answer be, well, then it's not for you?
Why do you think it would scare him off?
I don't. I think a lot of women are scared to ask the real questions in dating because they don't want to scare out the guy.
I would say that you should just ask those questions. And if he's scared off by that, the most unfortunate thing you can do to yourself as a woman, I think, is if you really want a family and you really want to be married, is to not ask those questions. And then you're spending a lot of time investing in someone that is not going to make sense or work out in the long run.
Right. Yeah. There is that idea of wasting time. So I think if that's something you prioritize, that it's fair to bring it up.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say you bring it up on the 4th or the 5th date. That's early enough to get it. Gives you a good idea of how are you connecting with him? What do you think about him? And then you get to see his reaction too. I do think if a man says, I really don't know if I want children, and that's where he's at, that you need to honor that. And then just say, I really do. So as much as I enjoy you, I don't think we should continue dating, because if that is your heartbeat, and people don't usually change their mind about that. And it's not fair to marry someone who really doesn't want to have children and think they're going to change their mind. And I have heard women say, well, I thought for sure he would change his mind. And that it's wrong. Because for any reason, to say, I thought he would change his mind about he told me clearly he didn't want to move from Texas, or whatever. And you thought, well, I just, I thought once he knew my family and how important it was to me, I thought that maybe after a couple of years he would change his mind and really grow to love them. And, but if you clearly said that at the beginning, that's something we need to honor and take seriously, is where people say they're at and not expect them to change. So I think that applies to having children too, or asking that about what they think.
What's one key for a really successful marriage? Obviously, you and Dad have been together 4 decades, and you've had ups and downs, but what's one piece of advice you'd give people?
My favorite piece of advice is to know how to say I'm sorry and to know how to say I forgive you. I don't think it's talked about much, but it absolutely re-energizes your marriage every single time. It is humbling. I struggled with it as a young wife. It was very hard for me to say I was sorry. And that surprised me. I didn't think it would be that hard. But I was trying so hard to do everything right that in my mind to say I was sorry meant that I wasn't trying hard. And I had excuses for why. And the excuses just get in the way. It really is just the humility of saying, I really was sorry. And why? I was sorry that I snapped at you. I shouldn't have said that. I said it in a moment of frustration, but I'm sure it was hurtful. Would you please forgive me? That's really the bones of a healthy apology. Not, I'm sorry I snapped at you, but you know what? I've had a headache all day, and then you came in late, and then you said, where's my coat? And we've already been through this, and you go on and on and on justifying yourself, it really can be as simple as, I'm sorry, I was wrong to do that. Would you please forgive me? And then honoring the fact that someone actually went through that and saying, yeah, I forgive you. Saying, I forgive you brings it full circle and then allows you to move on. And you might have to learn how to truly do that in your heart. But for us, that's how we've gotten this far with such cheerfulness, is because we've learned how to forgive each other and not hold it against each other and not bring it up. I mean, one of the rules of forgiving someone is not to bring it up in an argument a month later and say, you apologized last month for that. You must not have meant it, or bringing it back to their memory of how many times do we have to go through that? None of that. It's really believing the best of their intentions and honoring the fact that we do wrong each other and we do have to ask them to forgive us. One of the things I heard growing up was love means never having to say you're sorry. That's from some movie. I don't know what movie it was from, some movie from wherever ago. And even as a kid, I remember hearing that going, that's just stupid.
Yeah.
What does that mean? But people also just really don't value the apology. You'll say, I'm sorry. And they might go, don't worry about it. Don't give it another thought. Or instead of I'm sorry, they'll say, oh, my bad. Well, there's nothing there. There's nothing to restore you there. There's no sense of ownership there. There's no apology there. And if you don't say, I was wrong to accuse you of that, I mean, you've had someone apologize to you and you just want to go, do you even know what you did? What are you apologizing for? Are you apologizing for what you said, or are you just apologizing because you know I'm mad and you want me to be happy again? I mean, that's the beautiful thing about saying, I was wrong to do this, is then you let them know, I get it. I was wrong to do that. I'm not just apologizing because, or the another real generic one was, I'm sorry if I made you feel mad.
Yeah. I hate that one.
Like, come on. You're just sorry because now there's tension between us.
Yeah. So when I do something I need to apologize for to Kayla, what's the way to apologize in our marriage that would be the best way?
I think it's to find a time when you have a few minutes to process. And if you don't, to just say, honey, I know that we're late. Can we just take a few minutes? I need to apologize to you. And I really want you to hear me. Make sure that you've got that time to give it quality. And it doesn't have to be a long time. But then it is to simply say, I'm sorry, which lets her know you are sorry. I'm sorry, and then tell her what you're sorry that you did. I was wrong to, I don't know. I was wrong for whatever.
Like snapped at you. So step one is saying, I'm sorry, I was wrong to snap at you.
Yes.
Okay, and then what?
And then say, would you please forgive me for that?
Got it.
You don't have to give a promise. I promise I will never do that again. Or you don't have to berate yourself and say, I know that I know this is a real problem for me. I know that I just did this yesterday. Or I know that, when I do this, you feel that I'm doing it on purpose, but I'm not doing it. It does not have to be that extensive. It really can be simple. And the other thing I've told people, because to say, will you forgive me? That can be really hard to get out of your mouth.
That's harder than saying I'm sorry.
Yes, because you're now at their mercy of how are you going to process what I just said. So I do know that that's difficult. So I have encouraged some people to say, can we put this behind us? I think that communicates the same thing. Like, if we can put it behind us and move on, then you're telling us that you're not going to hold that against me. Or you could simply say, would you not hold that against me going forward? Something like that. I, being a very words-centric person, to me, forgive encompasses everything.
Yeah.
It just is the word. But I don't think you need to die on that hill. And I think couples can come up with their own way of expressing that. Basically, you're wanting to ask, can you put that behind you and not hold it against me? I think that's fair. And then she may say, you know what? that's where I want to land, but right now I'm really struggling. So if yes, I believe I'm going to get there, but right now I need a minute. That's okay too, as long as you don't use that minute or a couple hours that you need to punish the other person. Because and women can do that and manipulate in that way. And that's not fair.
Yeah, I think the hardest part about apologizing is, like, the reason it's so hard to apologize is because usually it's not just one-sided. Usually both people might have messed up a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's so hard for me sometimes to apologize when I'm not 100% in the wrong. Like, let's say I'm 80% in the wrong and she did something that disrespected me and she's 20% or however we want to say it. It's hard for me to apologize even though I'm in the wrong, because I'm like, well, you did this too, or I wouldn't have done this because you did this. One of the hardest reasons I think it is for me to apologize sometimes is because usually both people messed up a little bit. So let's say I messed up 90% and then I feel they messed up 10% or 50% or whatever. It's hard for me to say I'm sorry when I don't feel like they know what they did also. So, because it's usually not 100% zero. It's like, so what would you say to people that have difficulty apologizing in their relationship because they don't feel like they were the only one at fault? Do they just have to apologize without any justifications or without any caveats? I'm assuming the answer is yes.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
There you go. Nice.
I think always when you know that you need to apologize, you need to apologize. And sometimes it means that you're going to take the lead and apologize even when you may not get an apology back. I think for people that find it difficult, for what their role is in it, that they are on a journey to being able to own that. And so I would out of integrity apologize for what I did. But I think I would take advantage of another time when you're not in that moment of conflict to talk about it.
Got it.
Yeah. And that is a principle that works in general for bringing things up that are sensitive, is don't bring it up in a moment of conflict. So let's say you had this apology and she accepted it and said, yes, I forgive you, thank you. And you're just like, okay, but I kind of really I'm like, where's your apology? If it's like a pattern type thing, I think I would find a moment that has no conflict in it and just say, honey, I really want to talk to you about this. I think your heart is really turned toward me and you love me well. And I'm sensing, though, that it's challenging. It's hard for you to apologize, and I'm not quite sure why. And I wanted to explore that with you. I mean, and maybe ask, what does that feel like? She may not know. It might be a kind of thing, like for me, it was admitting that I was wrong. And I thought, how can I be wrong when I'm so giving it my all to be right?
Yeah.
Like that wasn't my intention of my heart, and I still did it wrong, and now I feel like a failure. Or
I do so much good. Why does a small thing even matter?
Yeah, like let it go. Don't make that. But to me, it was the sense of failure, and that just made me feel like worse of a person. So if Steve would have said, it doesn't mean that you're a failure to me. I know it's hard and it's humbling, but it just helps me know that you know that it hurt me. And then the burden is off of me to kind of handle that or carry that weight of, why did my wife hurt me on purpose? But I would explore the fact that it's difficult with the empathy of, do you know why it's hard for you to apologize? And I'm so sorry for whatever reason it might be. The wife might not know why it's hard.
Yeah.
But I think over time that she feels safe and knows that that's part of your relationship, that it might become easier to her.
Yeah.
But
gosh, apologizing is just so important, but it can also just lead to so much talking and like working in the first year of marriage. I mean, once you have kids, like I'm a little bit like, I have a healthy nervousness towards how things are going to be once we have kids, because people say, yeah, getting married is one thing, but having kids is when it really changes. So how did you and Dad stay focused on having a strong marriage, but you had so many kids that just took all of your attention? I mean, where do you find the time to work through, things with dad or connect with dad? Because at one point I was 5 years old. You had 3 kids below me and were pregnant, I think, with Anna. So how did you and dad ever have time for, prioritizing your marriage?
Yeah, we had 6 children in 8 years,
Jeez.
which is crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's what we wanted.
No twins.
But right. But it is super challenging. How did we take our marriage to that level? Well, I think we understood that marriage is a selfless experiment.
Yeah.
It is something that matures you, and if you lean into it, it's going to make you a better person. But to be a better person, you've got to recognize the selfishness that is rising up every time and be committed to trying to, you're not ever going to eradicate it, but to not allow it to win. And I think having children is so challenging because it peels another layer off of our onion skin self of selfishness. I mean, raising children well is the most selfless thing you can do because you're constantly denying yourself to rise up and to help that child. So a lot of times you're doing it for your child, and then your spouse gets the brunt of the end of your patience because you know how important it is to not lose your patience with your child, so then you lose your patience with your spouse, which means you have to have more patience for each other, which to me then highlights the fact that when you're dating, you should look for someone who shares the same values that you have. We shared the value of being selfless and not being selfish, thinking that to become mature would be, as an adult, to handle the responsibilities and do the tough things, even if we didn't want to. There's a lot of parenting of, I don't want to wake up again. I want to sleep. All those things mature us as individuals. And I think marriage is intended to mature us as people and to become better people. If you're approaching marriage in that way, then you're going to do that hard work. And the same thing with parenting. If you're approaching your children with, I am willing to sacrifice for you, then you do that. But if you see the children as encroaching on your peace and your comfort, it's a problem for sure. And I think you either buck up and grow up, or your children are going to pay the price, and your marriage is going to pay the price because there's no other way to go.
Yeah, so much of how we look at marriage is honestly because we're Christians and we have a perspective of, okay, this is selfless. This is not intended for it to be all about me, right?
Yeah.
So I'm surprised at people that are not Christians. I mean, how do they even make it and not get divorced? Because it's such a selfless thing, getting married.
Yeah.
And, learning how selfish you are and how you have to give of yourself and how to mature and become a better person through the marriage. But on top of that, and once you have kids, now it's like you're giving of yourself to the marriage, placing her life above your own, her needs. Ideally, that's what both people are doing. But then you do the same thing with your children. It'd be a much easier life to just not get married, make money, don't have kids. And a lot of men in LA do that. And then they just become 50 years old. They've had a selfish life. And that just seems like it'd be so easy to do if you're not a Christian. So, for your page, a lot of your advice isn't, Christian specific, but I feel like it's, rooted in some Christian principles. But what advice would you give to people who are not Christians in terms of how they could think about this in a way that could still be healthy? Because I guess it's like, okay, even if you're not a Christian, you should still understand that marriage is a selfless act and it's not all about you.
Yes.
Right?
Right. Yeah, I think that's a principle. So
got it.
For sure. That's what I want to give people, and to make it accessible is these are principles of marriage that regardless of where your faith is, I think you need to include these, which is what I've done in my book. Is I've got 17 chapters, and 15 of them are principles of marriage. What do you bring to a marriage to give it a solid structure to succeed. And then the last 2 chapters are one on marrying someone who shares your values and your faith. And then I include the fact that for me personally, my example is I'm a Christian, and so I married a Christian. I married what I call it marrying your match. But still, that's a principle of marriage. I'm not saying you have to be a Christian to have success or to get married. I'm just saying for me, we did that, and it just happened to be that we were Christians. And so we go with those principles. And then the last chapter is avoiding divorce and why I think that's so important. And that's a Christian value to avoid divorce because the Bible does talk about that. But again, I think for healthy, strong marriages, everyone wants to avoid divorce. So on those chapters, I actually do talk about where the rubber meets the road for me, that it is part of our faith that we brought to the table. But just structurally, those are principles that we would have.
Well, Mom, thank you so much for being my second guest on my podcast.
Love that.
Kayla had to leave early. She's up there making some lunch for me, you, and Dad, and her. But yeah, you are amazing. I'm so blessed to be your son. Kayla and I hope to have a marriage as amazing as you and Dad in 40 years.
Awesome.
And we're on our way. So
Yes, you are.
I love you.
Doing great. I love you too. This was really fun.
Cool.